Israel, where a major nationwide strike is now underway. The largest trade union says it wants to pressure the government of Benjamin Netanyahu into signing a Gaza ceasefire and captive release deal with Hamas. The action was called after the bodies of 6 Israeli captives were recovered from a tunnel in southern Gaza on Saturday. Well, the strike follows huge protests in cities across Israel on Sunday night. Tens of thousands of people rallied in Tel Aviv in some of the largest demonstrations since October the 7th. Police have made dozens of arrests. The protesters are demanding a ceasefire deal to release the remaining captives in Gaza. And Hamas has blamed Israeli airstrikes for those deaths of the 6 captives whose bodies were recovered on Saturday. Israel says they were found with bullet wounds. Dozens of people attended a vigil for one of the 6, Israeli-American Hersh Goldberg-Polin. Israeli Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich is now trying to halt the general strike. He's asked the Attorney General to impose a ban, saying the industrial action will have significant economic consequences. Opposition leader Yair Lapid has called for a complete government shutdown. Well, joining me here on set is Tamer Hammoud. He's an Associate Professor of Public Policy at the Doha Institute for Graduate Studies. Tamer, a very warm welcome to you. Welcome back to Al Jazeera. I think the most obvious question is whether or not these massive strikes, this action that we're seeing in Israel, will have the power to force Benjamin Netanyahu's hand.
Very good question, Yves, but it's yet to be seen. I mean, we haven't seen so many people demonstrating. We're talking about half a million. I mean, that's a significant number. The key issue here is the momentum. If these demonstrations stay on and the numbers increase, then they could pose a real threat for Netanyahu and his coalition. The unions are an umbrella for all. They're not political parties, but they're an umbrella for all for civilians in Israel by large, and Israel has a very strong unions historically, and they have played key role in influencing public opinion in Israel. So this time the tide is really high. And it would be interesting to see how would Netanyahu deal with such protests, especially that he has a very angry minister in his coalition, Smotrich, who has been threatening the unions, and that is unprecedented in Israel's history. I mean, given what Israel is, it's a social welfare democracy, and unions play a central role in shaping politics and public opinion to a great extent. So to antagonize unions in this critical moment, I think it would be interesting to see how would the larger Israeli public react to it as well. And we are at this juncture now where things could, I mean, the direction could change against Netanyahu as well at some point, and we'll see how things will evolve.
Is there any precedent for scenes that we've seen played out across Israel when it comes to a general strike on this level in the country? Of course, Benjamin Netanyahu has been under a huge amount of political pressure dating way before October the 7th, but anything like this?
Not in Israel's recent history, and I think, as you rightfully say, these tensions or these divisions among Israeli politicians and in the Israeli society, they come before, or they started before the Gaza war. And the Gaza war more or less has increased these divisions over issues that has to do with, of course, Netanyahu's government handling of the war and its outcomes, and the repercussions on the Israeli society, politics, and economy. There is a huge fracture in the Israeli society, and many Israelis worry about the future and nature of the Israeli state. Where is it heading? In what direction? Israel has been established on very strong secular foundations. This particular government has really taken Israel or hijacked Israel in a different path where Israel is gradually losing such secular identity, and this worries many Israelis who are not in agreement with the way this government is handling matters inside Israel. So again, numbers matter, momentum matters at this point. So if the numbers keep growing and the momentum keeps going on, I think Netanyahu will be in a very narrow corner. And if hopefully this also is accompanied by some pressure from the U.S. using its leverage, and when I say pressure, genuine pressure this time, not shows, maybe he will have to get out of his narrow corner and change the discourse of his politics.
All right. Tamer Kamut, many thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
Well, Udi Goran is a leading member of the Hostages and Missing Families Forum. He joins us now from West Jerusalem. Very warm welcome to Al Jazeera. So I understand that you have just been at the Knesset speaking to members of parliament. What are they saying to you?
We actually come here every single week to speak to them, speak out in the committees, and make our voices heard in the House of the People. I'm still in the Knesset, and we will be here for a few more hours. What we hear from them, it really, differs whether it's out in public or it's behind closed doors. And, we keep being here in order to make sure we influence them to call out, to make the right decisions when it comes to the hostage deal that's now on the table, and influencing the prime minister. As I think the analysis you've just heard was very accurate. I mean, Netanyahu is very, stubborn in his position at the moment, and this is why we are trying to influence not only him but also the ministers and the parliament members around him to do what we feel is right. Save the people, save the hostages.
How receptive do you think Benjamin Netanyahu is to demonstrations on this scale? We're talking about 500,000 people across Israel here. He has a tendency to bide his time and wait things out, but it's something different this time.
I think that he is the most experienced politician in the Israeli arena at the moment. And he's been through this many times. And this is why I say we are not only trying to influence him, we're trying to influence other parliament members. We're trying to influence the Israeli public to make the public's voice heard at the end of the day. And, I think it's very symbolic that I'm speaking to you from the House of the People, the Israeli Knesset, which should represent the will of the people. And by any kind of poll that has been presented in the past 3 months, the vast majority of Israelis want to see an end to this war with the hostages back home.
Anudi, you know all too well about what's at stake here because your cousin Tal was killed on October the 7th. I mean, the Netanyahu government insists on defeating Hamas first. But how much of this is about, in the eyes of many Israelis, safeguarding Netanyahu's political survival?
And many people, I apologize for the disturbance. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. While you correct the shot, let's carry on talking.
Yes,
you were saying.
Sorry. Yeah, I'm saying that I think at this point, many people believe that the way that this war is handled at the moment is influenced by politics rather than actual the actual reasoning behind running this war and defeating Hamas. I think that Israel must make sure that its borders are secure. We need to make sure that Hamas cannot carry out an attack like October 7th again. But in order to do so, we need a long-term plan. And this will not happen militarily. The military has done what it had to do, and that is weaken Hamas enough that they cannot hurt us, that they cannot carry out their barbaric attack on October 7th again. And from this point on, it needs to go into the diplomatic ranks.
There may, of course, be very obvious, palpable frictions within...
This is what needs to happen.
As I was just saying, there may be frictions, very clear and obvious frictions within Israeli society. We're seeing it on the streets across Israel. Frictions, too, within politics. But does this in any way signal a change of attitudes towards the rights and lives of Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank amongst Israeli people?
I think that, the Israeli liberal camp has been very much speaking about the lives of Gazans. I think that many people in Israel do see that there is a people on the other side of the fence. They do see that not only there is a people, that there are, human beings but that these human beings will be for the not just near, also far future, the people that we will be sharing this piece of land with. And in order to have a safe home for both people, we've got to learn to coexist. However, we cannot coexist as long as Hamas is in power, because Hamas is a terrorist group not only outwards towards Israel, it's also a terrorist group inwards. If we think about what it has done in the past 20 years since it got to power, or 18 years since it got to power, it hasn't invested in the people, in infrastructure. It has invested in fighting Israel instead of taking care of its own people. And I believe that, and many people like myself do believe that there's no other way rather than finding a long-standing solution how both people can exist on this piece of land. But it cannot be when one side is claiming that there's no room to the other side. And that, by the way, is a criticism that I have on both sides of the fence.
Of course, many Palestinians will give as an example the blockade of air, land and sea in Gaza as an example of decades-long oppression of Palestinians in Gaza, not to mention scenes that we're seeing play out on a regular basis in the occupied West Bank as well. If we're talking about a negotiated solution to this, speaking to Hamas seems like the most obvious option right now, doesn't it?
I agree. This is what we need to do at the moment. And yet we need to make sure that when we speak to Hamas, we speak to a Hamas that is willing to live side by side with Israel. Otherwise, there really is no solution. I mean, I don't see any other solution rather than the accepting the fact that between the river and the sea, there is an equal amount of Jews and Palestinians. And as long as one side is denying the existence of the other, then we cannot coexist. And as I've said, this is the criticism that I will carry out to anyone who claims otherwise. But as Hamas has it in its agenda to destroy Israel, then, of course, in the very near future, we've got to make sure that we reach a ceasefire and that we get all the hostages out, which is the most urgent matter. And then once we start looking into the long future, further into the future, we need to make sure that there's a new regional agreement here that Hamas is either willing to live side by side with Israel or is replaced.
Okay. Udi Goren, leading member of the Hostages and Missing Families Forum. Many thanks for joining us on Al Jazeera.
Thank you.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news from Al Jazeera.